Good morning, my name is Richard Lancaster and I'm a volunteer with Greenpeace, and I'd like to thank the teachers at Bridge Farm Primary for inviting me to give this pre-recorded talk to you this morning. So I'm a volunteer with Greenpeace, so I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about how Greenpeace started before I get on to the main subject for today's talk. So Greenpeace started back in 1971, and it was when a group of people, which you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of this picture, a group of people, they were Canadians and Americans, and they heard about the American government's plans to test a nuclear weapon, a nuclear bomb, off the coast of Alaska. And the picture on the top left there shows a picture of the world, and in the far top left you can see a little red square which shows where Alaska is, and then there's another map which shows a bit more of that expanded. And this place called Amchitka was where they were going to detonate the bomb, blow it up. And so this group of people, they hired this boat, this old fishing boat called the Phyllis Cormac, and their idea was to try and stop the Americans blowing up this bomb, and they were going to do it by sailing that ship to the test area to try and disrupt the testing. And that was how Greenpeace started back in 1971. Now, since then, Greenpeace has campaigned and does campaign on lots of different things. It campaigns about climate change, it campaigns about air pollution, and that picture shows some youngsters and the exhaust from a car there which can get into people's lungs and make them ill. We also campaign to defend the oceans, and that shows a picture of a whale. We also try and protect forests, and we campaign about single-use plastics, and that's what the bulk of today's talk is going to be about. And we also campaign about renewable energy, that's wind and solar. And the people who are involved in Greenpeace are just ordinary people, and these just show some pictures of people campaigning for Greenpeace, and you can see me and in fact my wife in some of those pictures, and that's me dressed up as a gorilla in one and as a monkey in another, and a bunch of us dressed up as penguins in another one. And they're different campaigns that we've been involved in. Now, I know that some of you have been reading the book Dear Greenpeace, and this is a story about a little girl called Emily who finds a whale in the pond in her back garden. And it stays there for a while, and Emily tries to help it, and she asks Greenpeace for advice, so she writes to Greenpeace, and the people at Greenpeace write back to her and give her some advice about how to feed and look after a whale. So I've got a little quiz for you. How many of these can you recognise? Have a look at the pictures and see what you can recognise. There are 5 things there. So just give you a moment to look. 2 or 3 of them are quite easy, even 4 of them, but the last one might be a bit difficult. So, what do you think they were? Well, the one at the top left, yeah, that's a turtle. And then the one in the middle, that's the top of the middle, that's a whale, a humpback whale. And over on the right, we've got a person swimming. And then underneath the whale, we've got a dolphin. And then on the far left, we've got something else. Did you know what that was? Some people thought it was a piranha. Some people thought it was a different type of fish. But that's actually a tuna fish. Now, the question is, which is the odd one out? And I bet some of you are thinking, oh, that's easy. And is it the person? Because all the others live in the sea. So you could say, well, it's the person's the odd one out. But here's another interesting thing. Is it the tuna? Because the tuna is actually the only one who can breathe underwater. All the others were mammals or reptiles, and they have to breathe air. And that means that if dolphins, whales, turtles get caught in fishing nets so they can't get to the surface, they drown just the same as you or I would if we got caught in a fishing net. And one of the problems about plastic is these plastic fishing nets. In the old days, fishermen used to use nets made out of rope, hemp. But these days they're all made out of plastic, and if a fishing boat loses one of its nets, then it sinks down into the sea, and things like dolphins and turtles can get caught in those nets, and then they drown and die. So one of the problems of plastics these days is these fishing nets. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a little short film, and this is a school trip, and it's a school trip to an aquarium. You know what an aquarium is, but it turns out when they get to this aquarium, it's not quite what they were hoping for.
I'm excited to see the penguins.
I want to see the otters.
I love the octopus. I'm excited to see the catfish. And 0% of plastic.
So, have you ever had a school trip like that? I hope not. But that was a trip to an aquarium, and there were no fish. All there were bits of plastic of different kinds. And one of the problems is that animals and birds quite often think that the plastic that's floating around in the sea is food. We've got some pictures here, a turtle and a couple of birds, and they've picked up things made out of plastic. The turtle's trying to eat a plastic bag. One of the birds has picked up one of the plastic wrappers that gets around a six-pack of baked beans or cans of beer. And then the third one, the bird is trying to eat the plastic that's left over from a party popper, one of those things that you have sometimes at parties. You pull the thing and it goes bang and sprays out some paper, but the plastic container gets left over. And very often they get washed into the sea. So, we're going to have a look at where all this plastic is coming from. And again, a little question here. Here's some pictures. What do these companies make? Well, that's quite an easy one, really. You look at it and you can say, I know what they are. There's breakfast cereals. I quite like those Frosted Flakes or something like that. And sure enough, here's the bowls of cereal. So that's easy. A paper carton of breakfast cereal, and there's the cereals. But if I was to ask you, what do these companies make, what would you say? You might recognise the packaging. And you might say, well, those companies make water. But well, you can't actually make water, can you? You can put it in bottles, but you can't make water. All you're doing is putting it in your bottle. So in fact, what these companies really make, apart from bottles, is they make a lot of plastic pollution. They make plastic bottles and they make pollution. Now, who's this chap? Well, this chap is Mr. Dr. Leo Hendrik Baekeland. And he's the person who invented plastic. Back in 1909, he invented the very first plastic. Now, since then, we've used plastic for lots of things, but this here shows how plastic is made from oil. And the way that the process works is that the oil comes out of the ground via an oil rig. It's then sent along a pipeline to an oil refinery, and then from the oil refinery, the oil is sent to a plastic factory, and the plastic factory makes little plastic pellets, and you can see those in the bottom left, and then those plastic pellets are made to make all the things that we're used to seeing made out of plastic. And what's plastic used for? Well, it's used for things like this. It's used for pipes in the ground, and that's a really good use of plastic because plastic lasts forever. So if you're going to put water or oil or gas or electric pipes in the ground, then plastic's a good way to protect them. And it's good for making things like vacuum cleaners and hair dryers and things like that. But increasingly today, we also use plastic for things like this, like plastic bottles and packaging, which is only used once and then thrown away. Now, after Dr. Leo Baekeland invented plastic over 100 years ago, to begin with, not much plastic was made. And this graph shows you how the amount of plastic that we make in the world has increased. So the first photograph there is above a graph of the sort of 1950s. And the 1950s is quite possibly when your grandparents were born in the 1950s. That's when I was born. And then in the 1980s and early 1990s, the second picture, that's sort of around the time many of your parents were born. And then the last picture there shows some children, and that's where some of your younger brothers or sisters were born. And you can see that the graph, that's a bar chart, we call that a bar chart, and you can see back in the 1950s there was hardly any plastic, and then you can see by 2014 there was loads of plastic. Now, not all plastic's bad, some plastic is absolutely great. So this is Lego, and Lego, you know, it's great fun. I guess lots of you like playing with Lego. I did when I was young. I like playing with it with my grandchildren as well. And it's great. You can use it. My grandchildren are playing with some of the Lego that I had as a child because it never wears out. You can use it lots of times, and when you finish with it, you can pass it on to somebody else. So that plastic's great. But the problem is this sort of plastic. We use plastic which lasts forever for things that we only need to last a few days. And this shows some pictures here of what we call disposable or single-use plastic. And that's plastic which is used once and then thrown away. And there's just too much of this type of plastic in the world now. And some plastic is really, really bad. And here's some really daft examples of plastic that's appearing in supermarkets now. And I wonder whether you can see what some of these pictures show. Have a look at them. And let's have a look. We've got right in the top there, we've got some boiled eggs, where they've hard-boiled the egg, and then they've taken the shell off, and then they've wrapped the egg in plastic to sell it in the supermarket. And then next to that is a single banana that's been shrink-wrapped in polystyrene, which is type of plastic, and then shrink-wrapped plastic. And then we've got down below, we've got all sorts of things. We've got a can of Coca-Cola that's in a plastic container. We've got carrots and lemons that are individually wrapped in plastic. We've got a tube of 4 apples in plastic. We've got an orange that someone has peeled and then put in plastic. And we've got some sweet potatoes that have been put in plastic. And here we've got some others. We've got some cans that have been put in plastic. we've got an orange there that's been peeled, and then all of the segments of the orange have been separated and been put in plastic, and we've got apples that have been cut, peeled, sliced, and then put in plastic, and up the top there's individual strawberries. I think that was for Valentine's Day, which we just had. So you could give your sweetheart an individual strawberry wrapped in plastic. And the trouble is, it's very difficult to get away from this because supermarkets at the moment wrap everything in plastic. So, we've got a little quiz. How good are you at spotting what's in plastic? Here's three things: chewing gum, cheese, and rice. Which one contains plastic? Have a quick look. It's the chewing gum. Yes, chewing gum contains plastic, which is one reason why you should never swallow chewing gum. Now, which one of these? Paper clips, newspapers, or tea bags? Which one contains plastic? It's the tea bags. Yes, again, tea bags contain plastic. Which one of these? Foil, egg boxes, or those what we call Tetra Pak cartons. They're cartons for drinks and orange squash and things like that. That's right, it's the cartons. Although they're made mainly of cardboard, they have plastic coating. Now, which one of these contains plastic? Is it glass bottles, enamel mugs, or paper cups? It's the paper cups. And that's because these paper cups, if you just tried to put a hot drink in a cup that was only paper, then it would go all soggy and the drink would leak out and burn your hands. So even plastic cups have a paper cups have a plastic coating to stop them leaking. Now, which one of these contains plastic? Is it a brick? Is it a crisp packet, or is it a glass jar? Where it's the crisp packets, and again they're made out of plastic to keep the crisps fresh and crisp. What about these? Gift wrap, ribbons, matches, or what we call a tote bag, canvas bag. And it's the gift wrap. So again, once you've wrapped all your presents at Christmas, and when you throw away that gift wrap, that's all plastic that can cause damage. What about these? Wooden cutlery, cardboard food boxes, or paper bags? Did you guess right? It's the cardboard food box. Because although it's mainly cardboard, again, it's got a plastic coating, because if it didn't have, then the food would leak out. And then this one, porcelain plates, wet wipes, or coloured soap. Which one contains plastic? Well, it's those wet wipes, and wet wipes are a really big problem for the environment. It turns out that there are now 8.3 billion tonnes of plastic in the world. And what's been happening to all the plastic? Well, some of it is recycled, but only a very small amount, 9%. About 12% is burnt or incinerated, but the rest, about 79%, either ends up in landfill, which is like where your rubbish goes to from your dustbin, and it ends up in the environment. And there are three ways that plastic can get into the sea, and we saw right at the beginning of this talk about the sea and plastics. And one way is litter. If things get left as litter, then they can blow into the drains, and the drains, the storm drains in streets that take the rainwater, they just go straight out to rivers and sea. And so any rubbish, any plastic that ends up in the drains, then just gets washed out to sea. Another way is down the plug hole, and some of the things that you use in the house, like microplastics in toothpaste and things like that, And tea bags, if bits come off tea bags and can go down the plug hole. So that's a second way. And then the third way is that any rubbish that you put, plastic you put in your dustbin, it goes to landfill. But the landfill sites, as they're starting to bury the stuff, sometimes if there's a bit of wind or seagulls come along, they pick up bits of plastic, or the wind blows, and it can blow it into the sea as well. And this shows another problem, which is in lots of parts of the world. Just look at this short video here.
Este es una quizás flagrante del delito ambiental que cometen los municipios. Municipalidad Distrital de Castillo-Barranquilla.
And that's a video because lots of places in the world don't have proper recycling or rubbish collections, and people just dump plastic in the rivers anyway. And then what happens when the plastic reaches the sea? This is the sort of thing that happens. So we can see here some pictures of a bird that swallowed plastic, and we can see seals caught up in plastic. And in this picture here, the last picture, can you work out what's happened there? It's a turtle, and what's happened is that when it was a baby turtle, it got caught in one of those six-pack plastic binders, and then the plastic is so strong it won't break, and so the turtle's shell has grown around the plastic because it can't break the plastic. So, what can we do? What can we all do to try and reduce the amount of plastic? Well, one thing is recycling. We can make old things out of new. But is recycling the answer to it all? Well, it's part of the answer, because certainly we shouldn't be throwing away plastic. We should be trying to recycle it. And if you just throw plastic into your rubbish bin, it will end up on landfill, and then it'll end up getting washed out to sea, and that's where the red arrows are. But the green arrows, if you put stuff in your recycling box, properly sorted and washed, then it can be made into new things like clothing or kitchen utensils. But the problem is that there's just too much, and recycling is a really dirty, messy business. Even when you put it in the recycling bin, it ends up in a factory like this where people have to sort through it all to try and sort out which bits can be used and which bits can't. And this here is just one day's recycling of plastic bottles in Bristol. So that shows you how many plastic bottles are now being sent for recycling. Now the fact they're being sent for recycling is good, but there is a problem with recycling. And that is that certain things like aluminium and steel and glass can be recycled indefinitely. Indefinitely means as often as you like. They can just keep, you can keep using them again and again. So steel never kind of wears out. So if you use a steel can, like a baked bean can or a soup can, you put it in the recycling, it can go and make new steel, and it will come back and it will be as good as before. And the same is true of aluminium or glass. But the problems with some other things, paper and plastic. Now paper, after it's been recycled a few times, it kind of breaks down and it can't be recycled anymore. But that doesn't matter because it's made out of wood pulp, so it will rot away. But plastic, it can only be recycled a few times. 7 to 9 is the maximum, but sometimes it's only as few as 2 times. So what you find is that even if you put it into the recycling, you put a clear bottle into the recycling, then it gets recycled the next time as a coloured bottle, and then the next time there's a darker colour bottle, but then after a few times it ends up just being recycled. It's only good for making a black bin liner, and then that black bin liner, when you fill it up, it goes into landfill. So plastic eventually ends up in landfill, even if you recycle it a few times. So we do need to recycle, but we have to recognise that we need to reduce the amount of plastic that we're using as well. And there are ways you can do that, and in some parts of the world people are using plastic to build houses and things, and this is called eco-bricks. And this picture shows some people who are making some buildings out of plastic bottles, and what they do is they get a plastic bottle and they stuff it with other plastic till it's as hard as a brick, and then they build houses from them. They can do that in places like Africa and South America, but we don't really do that over here. But there are some other things you could do with plastic bottles. You could use them as planters, or as bird feeders, or even in your kitchen somewhere to hang your spoons. But ideally what we want to do is to refuse all of that single-use plastic. And there are ways of doing that. We can be like this little girl and refuse disposable plastic. And we can do that by making sure that we don't buy bottles of water in the shops, but we take our own water bottle. And I guess most of you bring your own water bottle to school. And we can say we don't want straws, because straws are a complete waste of plastic. And we can take our own cup when we go out, and they'll refill it in a coffee shop or something, so we don't have to take one away. We can make sure that we get milk delivered in a glass milk bottle, so we don't buy plastic bottles. We can make sure that we take our own, if we think we're going to have a meal out, we can take one of these wooden, it's like a halfway between a spoon and a fork, called a spork. And so you don't have to get given cutlery, plastic cutlery, if you're out having a meal out, a takeaway meal. And you have to say that you don't want any stupid plastic packaging like this banana that's in plastic. And you can always take your own shopping bags, you don't get given a plastic bag. Use loose-leaf tea instead of tea bags. And use refills wherever possible. And if you've got a choice, if you really do want that can of fizzy drink, then it's better to go for a can or a bottle, a glass bottle, rather than a plastic bottle. So if you really do need a fizzy drink, try and make sure you get a can or a glass bottle, because those can be recycled. And try and make sure that you use recyclable and reusable bags for your packed lunch, like this. And also try and avoid those wet wipes, because they've got plastic in them, and just try and avoid plastic bottles of soap. Just use a bar of soap. There's no plastic there at all. And also party balloons and party poppers, things like that are really bad, because that's more plastic that just ends up, like these balloons have, ends up getting blown out to sea. And the other thing you can do is to try and go to shops that don't wrap everything in plastic. And one of the shops that we have where I live in Aylesey is called Simply Green, and this is Beth who runs Simply Green. And if you go in there, you take your own containers, and she puts whatever you want into your own containers, and you take them away. So, and if you haven't got containers, she'll give you a paper bag, so no plastic at all there. And also you can go to the greengrocers, where more of it is kind of loose. You can buy the vegetables loose and just put them straight in your bag. And these are a couple of the greengrocers where I live again in Aylesey. And you can make people aware of it. You might like to design a poster to remind people to reuse and reduce and recycle. So these are some that were done by other schools. And lots of schools are taking action to try and reduce their plastic. And then they're becoming plastic-free schools, and these are some examples of schools around the country that are doing that. And you can make sure that you tell people about it. You learned about it today, and this is a little quote by somebody who went home and told their dad about plastic and the fact that it ended up in landfill because he didn't know. Remember the 4 R's. Refuse, so don't buy anything that you don't need, and refuse things like plastic straws. Reduce, so make sure you use less of it and you don't waste things. Reuse, if you possibly can, use it time and time again, and a cloth shopping bag is a good example of that. And then when you find you can't use it anymore, make sure you wash it out and put it in the recycling so that it can be made into something new. Right, that's it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you found that interesting. And we're hoping to have a question session via Zoom in a bit later on. So think of some questions about what I've spoken about, and I hope to see you on a Zoom session in a not too distant future. Thanks for listening.